Hola a toda la audiencia de CriptoNoticias. Nos encontramos aquí con Adam Back, la leyenda, el creador de Hashcash, una de las personas mencionadas en el white paper de Bitcoin, la primera persona en recibir el white paper de Bitcoin directamente de Satoshi. Y bueno, estamos muy entusiasmados por hablar con él hoy. How are you, Adam? Thank you for being with us.
Of course, yeah, happy to be on.
I wanted to pick your mind on your other interest aside Bitcoin. Do you enjoy literature? Do you read? Are you a reader?
Not much. I used to read some science fiction, and when I got interested in the Cypherpunk list, they were recommending some Cypherpunk-related literature. So there's Shockwave Rider, Neuromancer. The one I liked better was Snow Crash.
Okay.
So it's fun. If you read it, you might recognize some Bitcoin themes, even though it's written probably 40 years ago now or something, right? So it was, actually I'm not sure what year, but you know, it's probably read that 30 years ago or something, so at least that long ago, right?
Okay, is there a book you would recommend to somebody you need to read this book, it will change your life, or maybe some book that did change your life?
Well, perspective not really, but I mean, I like Snow Crash, it's fun, and it's talking about implications of electronic cash and of a much more decentralized society with no government. Or, I mean, it's amusing because in the book they meet the fellow that claims he's the president of the US,
okay,
but they don't care because the US is some kind of small kind of political sect that nobody listens to.
Okay.
So the whole country is just, you know, people doing as they wish or working together or joining like a company or something like that. So it's very free market outlook on how society could be organized with electronic cash and so on.
Do you feel it's somehow premonitory?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Bitcoin is a building block to get to that future, actually. So, you know, I was saying that Snow Crash is a blueprint, which is that it's, you know, it shows how the future can be organized, let's say.
How did you get first interested in cryptography? What was it with it that appealed you in the first place?
I'm not sure. I mean, I was implementing some basic cryptography for my own interest when I was doing my A-levels. So there was no computer science choice. They didn't have computer science at that time in A-level 16 to 18. And but they had a computer lab. So I taught myself to program in Pascal was the language, and they had a basic interpreter. So I hit on the idea of protecting some software by self-encrypting it. So when you run it, it would ask for a password. You take the password, it would decrypt the actual software from the rest of the code, and then it would run it. So if somebody found the software, they wouldn't be able to tell what it was going to do. Okay.
Well, historically, cryptography was very political at the beginning, with this Phil Zimmerman being incarcerated because of PGP and cryptography actually being an ammunition. Did you feel in that moment that it was a political movement you were also getting into, or it was mainly the technical aspect that
well, I mean, yeah, Zimmerman, who's the author of PGP, he was under grand jury indictment or something, which meant that the US government was investigating him with a view to prosecuting him. Now, of course, he eventually got that dropped, but and the reason they were trying to legally attack him is he had implemented encryption software in PGP, and you could download it from the internet. And so they argued that, the government argued that there are rules preventing export of cryptography from the US. And other countries some of them had similar rules and some of them had no rules. You can do whatever you want with software, right? So ultimately, that US rule was overturned, repealed. So you get, people mounted court cases to challenge it. But yeah, in terms of what the cypherpunks were trying to do, it was more about trying to build the future. So you can see an example with Skype or Uber. If you're trying to do something new and different, if you ask permission, you try to get a telecoms license to do voice over IP in the case of Skype, or you try to get, a different type of taxi license if you Uber, they're going to say no. So what they did is they just did it anyway, and then when they got legally attacked, they fought it, or they just moved to a different country or different state, and it's global. And there was enough user demand that said, hey, wait a minute, this is good. We like voice over IP. It's cheaper than your telecoms. Your telecom's too expensive for international calls. So now nobody needs to pay for international calls. They can just use, any kind of voice, video app, dozens of them, right? So it was a similar mindset to the cypherpunks, that if you wanted more self-sovereignty and privacy online, the cypherpunks were just going to build the tools and people were going to use it, and they didn't really care if people didn't like, if the establishment didn't like it. And so Eric Hughes, who was one of the co-founders who sort of set up the cypherpunks mailing list, he wrote a cypherpunks manifesto, which basically says that, in a more poetic way.
The Declaration of Independence of the cyberspace.
Yeah. So it's not really a political movement. It's a pragmatic self-sovereignty. We're gonna, build a technology to help people help themselves. So it's more a self-help technology. You can do things kind of movement.
And what do you think about the environment in which Bitcoin appeared? I mean, the research or the interest in electronic cash was very high in the 90s, but it was still something that was being researched in the early 2000s or so.
Yeah, there was I think the first electronic cash with privacy was David Chaum's blind signatures. Yeah, so he wrote a paper about blind signatures, which is a technology to do it, and then that was improved slowly by other researchers. But he started a company which was running in the 90s, and they implemented this. And so the cypherpunks and people interested in the internet thought it was very cool because you had kind of bearer electronic cash, and it works quite differently to Bitcoin. So there's a central server which is issuing the coins, and then if I give you a coin, you can take it to the server, and the server can see it's not spent, and then they can give you a fresh coin so you can respend it. And the interesting thing is that even though I got my coin from the server and then I gave it to you, the server won't tell it's the same coin when it goes back, but it can still tell it's not spent. That's due to the blinding tech. So
it will be more fungible then.
Yeah, so it's extremely strong privacy and cryptographic fungibility, but the fungibility is there because the server can't link it. It doesn't have enough information. So all they could do is shut it off, or they can't selectively do anything. So they don't have any information to use to decide what to selectively block or not accept, right? So that was DigiCash protocol, and what happened is the company failed, so they ran out of money, and then the database went offline, and then anybody who had the coins couldn't test or prove that they were valid, so it was the end. So the cypherpunks thought it's then we have to repair it, like work out how to make it decentralized, basically. Because the view was that the reason it failed is because it's centralized. So the solution is you have to make it decentralized. So that's what they were trying to brainstorm how to do. So this happened in, I think it fell probably in the mid-90s, maybe 95, something like that. And so by 1997, I proposed Hashcash, which is a postage stamp for email or anti-spam, where you do some work to create the stamp, and then you attach it to the mail, and the recipient can tell that you spent a certain amount of effort to do it, so it makes it less likely to be spam because it's got a cost, right? So in that context, people, when I posted it in 97, immediately multiple people recognized that this could be a potential building block for building decentralized electronic cash, because the other problem with the centralized system is that the way you would get money in is you would make a bank transfer. And so that's hard, you can't really do that in a decentralized system because there's no company to have the bank account. So with proof of work, you could mine the coins basically. So that became part of the design of these kind of things.
And when Satoshi first shared with you the white paper, did you thought it was going to be as revolutionary as it has become?
Well, I could see that it was that he'd solved the problem, one of the problems, because when people were trying to figure out how to make this work, so in the mid-90s and after Hashcash, so that was 97, people realized that proof of work could be a building block to make it decentralized. By 1997 and 1998, by 1998, Nick Szabo proposed Bitgold and Oidai proposed B-Money, and they were sort of a bit like Bitcoin ideas, but with some pieces not working very well. And so, what Satoshi did is he managed to solve that problem. I mean, the problem was really about how to control inflation, and those B-Money and Bitgold were trying to create a coin that would always be worth $1, or like a standard value, which is hard to do. Whereas what Satoshi did with Bitcoin is he just made the difficulty adjustment so that the blocks come out on a standard time, every 10 minutes, and then because of that, he can control how fast the coin's coming into circulation, and then just lets the market decide what the price is. So it turns out that controlling the supply, you can easily do. So it turns out that you can you can make a decentralized system that can verify and enforce the supply curve. And so that was one of the missing design ideas, right? So he solved that. So when I saw the paper, I realized that, he's solved the problem, right? But the next question was, will it bootstrap? Like, will enough users use it and stay using it for it to start to become a means to pay for things, for it to develop a price? And so I thought, well, let's see. Let's wait and see, right? And it took a few years before that happened. So
you were involved during that time or no?
No. So, I was looking at the news, maybe a little bit of discussion on a list or on Wikipedia, and later joined the Bitcoin Talk Forum in 2013. So I was kind of waiting for some news that indicated it was happening, people were using it. And there was a post on Slashdot that Bitcoin had crossed $1 in 2013, I think, or maybe 2012, I don't remember exactly. And then in 2013, it crossed $100. So, I could see that, there are about 10 million coins mined at that point, right? Because it was after the first halving, and the first halving mines half of the coins, so 10.5 million coins. So you can see that $1, the market cap is 10.5 million, or 10 million, and when it got to 100, that's $1 billion. So I thought, maybe it's starting to happen when I saw, 10 million market cap. When I saw $1 billion, I was like, wait, let's going too fast. It's probably happening. I better go look at it. And
did you feel that you lost the train in any moment?
No, I mean, I was just thinking it's bootstrapped. So then now it's relevant. And so then I want to understand it and try and improve it, basically. That was the thought process. So I went and read everything I could find, and there wasn't that much technical documentation at the time, so I ran out. And then I went to find where the developers were talking, which was the Bitcoin Wizards IRC, so I could ask them questions that are not covered in the documentation about how it works. So now I try to understand all the details. And after I understood enough of it, then I started trying to improve it and proposed confidential transactions.
That was your first contribution?
Yeah. And then so then I thought, well, this could be useful for Bitcoin because it would hide the values and provide some form of privacy.
Those are the same confidential transactions that works on Liquid.
Yeah. So that was when the idea was proposed in 2013. And then I talked to the Bitcoin developers to see how easy would it be, how practical to integrate that into Bitcoin. And I realized that it's actually a little difficult. It's difficult to add something complicated to Bitcoin. So then I thought, well, maybe I can find a way to make Bitcoin more modular, so it's easier to add innovative features without needing consensus changes. So that's where the sidechain idea came from. Within the sidechain, you can make changes or add new features without affecting the Bitcoin consensus. So when I, some discussion about that, and I thought, okay, that looks like it should work, so let's build it. So I realized, well, you're going to need, to hire people, apart from protocol developers, you need to hire user interface, you're going to need to build a wallet, you need to build an explorer.
Yeah,
you
whole
need
infrastructure.
Design, so now you need a whole company, so I'm going to need some money. So I recruited a friend of mine who was co-founder of a privacy tech company in Canada, because I thought of the kind of entrepreneur fundraising type of people I knew. He was on the Cypherpunk list. He was very interested in privacy technology. He invested his own money in that privacy technology company, him and his brother. And so he would be able to understand Bitcoin quickly and be enthusiastic about it. So I went to see him. This is Austin Hill. And went to see him in Canada and brain dumped him about Bitcoin. And then he came over to Malta and we spent a week with a whiteboard and a little conference room brainstorming about all the stuff you might need to build and stuff like that. So that was the beginning of Blockstream. And so, yeah, we did what we aimed to do, right? We implemented confidential transactions, we implemented sidechains, we acquired a wallet that integrated Liquid support, we built a block explorer, and a number of other things that go around it. And then we also built a Lightning, recruited some people to build a Lightning implementation because blockchains are hard to scale, and that applies to Liquid as well. So if you could do interesting things on Liquid, you still need to scale it. So we need Lightning to work on Liquid. So the core Lightning implementation works on Liquid as well.
And moving fast forward to this day with all this institutional adoption happening, also Blockstream opening a new venture with Bitcoin, buying Bitcoin and institutional adoption.
Yeah.
Do you still feel that Bitcoin is cypherpunk money? Or what do you think Satoshi will think about what is happening right now?
I don't know. I mean, it's I'd say by anybody's expectation, Bitcoin has succeeded far faster than they would have expected at this stage in time, right? And I think in terms of its cypherpunk kind of roots or characteristics, it's, the value is two things. One is the direct value of enabling transactions, enabling unseizable money, enabling permissionless ability to transact and save globally, right? Because about 50% of the world's workforce is informal. And so many of them don't, people working in informal in some countries don't have a bank account, they can't get a PayPal account, they don't have government ID. And so Bitcoin enables them to set up a Bitcoin wallet, and now they're connected to the global financial network, to the global economy. So I think, the addressable market is enormous. Some people are using it, but there are many more people who could benefit from it. So that's a key part of the financial value of Bitcoin. It's a bit like the internet, it enables people to connect, to get information, to do things that they couldn't do before, and so it has a value. And then you get a lot of people using it. And so it's a sort of similar concept with Bitcoin, that you have a lot of people interested in being able to transact. So I think that's part of it. And then the other part of it is it becomes an investable asset, because you can see this adoption and the utility of it. You can also buy the asset, and the asset is subject to supply and demand. It develops a price. I'm not sure when the first exchange started, but let's say 2011, 2012, something like that. Starts to have a price, and as the adoption and the demand grows, the price obviously moves up because there's a limitation, a scarcity in the number of coins, right? So I think it's both, sort of digital gold, savings, and a global permissionless transaction and savings network.
Okay. And you mentioned the similarities with the internet, but lately we can get the feeling that the internet, at least the mainstream internet, is being captured by big corporations as well, by Alphabet, Meta, and all of that. Do you foresee that somehow Bitcoin can also become captured in some way?
I mean, you can see it because what made it possible for the internet to be captured is people started to, earlier they would run their own website, and then they started to use a hosting provider or a social media app that helps you write a blog, but it's all hosted by the company. And then the social media company starts to interfere, censor, delete, or try to influence the visibility, to steer people's views by showing them information that's biased, politically biased. And so you see blowback, and people start to host themselves and use more distributed applications. And in Bitcoin terms, one example of something like that happening is BitPay, which is a payment integrator for Bitcoin. So a merchant could sign up with them, they could accept Bitcoin on the store, and they would receive dollars on the back. But they started to require identity to receive the payment, even if it's not necessary, because it's just a PDF, right? Because if you're gonna buy physical goods, you need an address to send it to, but they're asking for identity always. And then the other thing that happened is there were the block size wars, and BitGo started to pick sides, and they like big blocks. And so Nicolas Dorier wrote a famous tweet, which is, "My trust in you is broken.
I'm gonna make you obsolete."
I'm gonna make you obsolete, yeah. So then he got busy as a coder, and he implemented a, be your own merchant processor. It's kind of like a be your own bank, right? So a software package that you could integrate with a website, and you could receive Bitcoin payments, stablecoin payments on, you get stablecoins on Liquid, you could get Bitcoin on Lightning, Bitcoin on main chain, Bitcoin on Liquid, all integrated in the website with some stores, and you could do it yourself. So there was nobody that could impose a requirement, artificial requirement for KYC, start to make a decision in terms of which node they run or which network they're on. You can control it yourself. So you can see that there is, with Bitcoin, a bit more of a possibility to choose for yourself.
always. Don't you think about a scenario in which you wake up one day and say, "Wow, we've been captured somehow"? Is that a concern for you that it's going to happen somehow by the states or by corporations? I don't know.
I mean, I think the price of decentralization is eternal vigilance, which is why people are always questioning everything, right? They want to know, is this safe? Is this centralizing? Is this a bad thing? And then they advocate people to switch or to cold store. So there is some form of competition where even if there are some service providers, let's say ETF, for people who buy Bitcoin through a brokerage, they end up with the ETF. But there are competing ETF providers. So if one ETF did something that they didn't like, they'd sell it and buy another one. And so it's sort of an indirect way for the system to remain resilient or react to something they don't like, right? As long as it's not a monopoly. And of course they can also react by buying physical Bitcoin and cold storing it. So as long as that remains the case, there's a natural balance, which is if the service providers start to get aggressive and impose too many establishment views, people will just leave. So it's there's a balance. They can't do too much because people have a way out.
Okay.
Whereas today with the banks, you have no way. I mean, you can take physical cash, but you can't transact that at a distance. So you have more choice and determination.
And what about this corporative movement of treasuries, with MicroStrategy having more than half a million Bitcoin, and other companies as well joining in this arms race for becoming big Bitcoin holders? Is there any threat with this? It's going to be challenging the decentralization of the network somehow, aside from the price? Or maybe could they become the ones that sets the price in the market?
Well, they are taking Bitcoin off the market because they buy it and then they don't sell it. But people are still trading it because they trade their stock. No, I mean, I think they're doing it. I mean, it's not what they can do for Bitcoin, but what Bitcoin can do for them. I think they're doing it because they recognize there's inflation and they want to protect themselves. And then, once they started doing it, you could see this with MicroStrategy, that they bought some Bitcoin and then they got the idea to buy more. And it turns out that a company is a quite efficient mechanism for being able to sort of borrow money or receive money from the market by selling more shares to raise money to buy more Bitcoin in a way that can sometimes be repeated. So it can be a more rapid way to acquire Bitcoin to buy shares in a company than to do it yourself.
And is it not like a central banker printing money out of thin air to buy a better asset somehow?
I mean, they can print shares, but the thing is, generally speaking, shareholders don't like you to dilute and to print a lot of shares because the value
with a strategy, it feels like they like it actually.
But there's a difference here. So normally, if a company does some dilution and they don't do anything useful with the money, the share price will fall. Now, if they do some dilution to build a new product and the product's successful, then maybe the share price will go up. But in the case of MicroStrategy, because they have a premium, their shares trade above the value of the Bitcoin in the shares, they can actually do dilution in a positive way. So they can sell some shares and then buy Bitcoin, and all of the shareholders end up with a little bit more Bitcoin per share. So when you see that effect, you don't mind about dilution anymore because dilution benefits you. So they generally are not likely to do share dilution if it doesn't increase the Bitcoin per share. They're focused on increasing Bitcoin per share basically.
And do you foresee a moment in which that trend stops and it stops being profitable, and the shares stop going up and reproduce this virtuous cycle.
Yeah, when Bitcoin is fully adopted.
Okay.
Because, I mean, it's like the reason that Bitcoin is going up is because it's getting rapidly adopted. At some point, it's saturated. You know, we don't know how much. Maybe it reaches parity with gold at $1 million. Or maybe it does what Halfini was thinking, goes to 10 million and it demonetizes real estate and bonds and shares. But once it gets there, there's not much more room to grow, right? I mean, you've got inflation. If you keep up with inflation, so it will increase because of inflation, but it won't be growing because of rapid growth and adoption. You would just have, maybe population growth. If the global population is growing, it might grow up a little because of that. And so it won't be going up very fast. So it won't be able to command a very high premium. And so then the whole thing will slow down.
And with this, trend happening and more companies creating their corporate treasuries, do you believe this massification, this hyper-Bitcoinization, it's going to happen because of them pushing this agenda and this strategy being reproduced in several companies?
Well, I mean, it's all the same thing. Like, I think Bitcoin is mispriced, and so it's an arbitrage between the current fiat world and a Bitcoinized future, where Bitcoin should be 10 million a share. And so anybody who sees that they think it's going to happen, then they want to buy as much Bitcoin as they can today before it goes up 100 times, right? And so, they're all doing the same thing, the same incentive. Individuals buying Bitcoin, reducing their spending, selling something, trying to work harder, try and get some more money, buy some more Bitcoin while it's still cheap. And the companies are basically doing the same thing. And, there are now some governments like the Sovereign Wealth Fund in Abu Dhabi. Swiss National Bank has some MicroStrategy shares, so indirectly some Bitcoin. El Salvador is buying Bitcoin. So you've got lots of different things trying to fight over getting the Bitcoin while it's cheap. I think the companies are just another vehicle for that, but they do have a bit more force because the mechanism of a company allows you to do it a bit faster and more sort of repeat it. But when those companies are growing, it's not as if they are just able to buy Bitcoin. They're partly able to buy Bitcoin because there are more users coming in. It's a bit like an ETF, right? So an ETF, they buy more Bitcoin, but that's actually user money because they came in and they put the money in and they bought. So they created more ETF units. So in a share, they created more share units. And people are buying them. And so it's growing because the number of users is growing, the number of buyers as well. But they are able to bring capital in from people who are not trying to buy Bitcoin. Like they're trying to buy these preferred shares which are paying an interest. Or they can borrow money, they can sell shares. So there's a mixture of growing because new users are investing in it, and also growing because they're able to use their company structures to be a faster, more effective way of accumulating Bitcoin. So effectively what I'm saying is, if one guy is trying to buy Bitcoin with his job, he can accumulate Bitcoin, some percentages he can save. But if he makes a company, or he goes together with some friends and they make a company, they have an advantage with the company, so they can do the same thing a bit faster.